Welcome, everyone, to the Cup of Coffee podcast with me, your host, Tom Dillon. This is being recorded live as our weekly online meeting and broadcast around the world. Today's topic is doing your due diligence with Julie Whitmore. Julie has 30 years' experience of working in corporate roles. She also has a mixed portfolio of buy-to-lets, HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, and hands-on experience. She's a writer for Your Property Network magazine and an experienced property sourcer. She likes to help other investors as a coach and mentor, focusing on removing internal blockers and building people skills. Outside of property, she's a trained life and future life therapist. Hello, Julie.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Morning, Tom, everyone in the meeting, everyone out there listening. Great to be with you. Looking forward to sharing some of my experiences working in the industry over the past 10 to 12 years.
Wonderful. Really appreciate you being here. Do you want to, speaking of sharing your experience, do you want to, I think that's some lovely slides for
Right,
us.
we'll start the slideshow, shall we, Tom?
Do some
Okay.
slides, and then for those listening and watching, Julie's going to share some things with us, and then at the end we'll have some Q&A. So if anyone in the live meeting has any questions, then either stick them in the chat or get ready to jump in, and we'll go that way. Have at it, Julie. The floor is yours.
Right, thanks very much. I know we've got quite a few experienced people in the meeting this morning, so apologies if some of this is sort of teaching you to suck eggs, but this has come about from my passion about seeing people in this industry falling foul to when things go wrong, to people that are disingenuous, for want of another word. And I'm really trying to provide people with some simple guidance of how they can understand who they are working with. So it's called due diligence for a reason. It's not a typo, because this is not about people checking or doing numbers on a project. The people can be more important than the project, because you can't control people's behaviors. So you do really need to understand a bit more about whether you're doing a joint venture with somebody, collaboration, you're going into business with them as a business partner, or even working with tradespeople. So it's a bit of a frank, warts and all expose, should we say, of some of my own experiences. And whilst they might be humorous in the way that I portray them, some of them have actually been quite painful and cost me a lot of money. So this is a real warts and all. Okay, Tom, it's not letting me move the slide forward.
We got our first technical gremlins.
Yeah, it worked on the trial.
Yeah, we did it in the dry run. What's the best? I'll tell you what, first thing I'm going to do is pause the recording to help our technical guy.
So what is due diligence? It's practical advice and tips how you can understand and learn more about the people that you are looking to work with, just using readily available tools. There's nothing clever here. You're not paying to do specialist reports or anything like that. And some of the stuff that I've come across has actually been really incidental. I am a bit of a technophobe. I will share that with people. So if I can do this, anybody can do this. So just a bit about me. I had a corporate background for 30 years, became an accidental landlord, which is how I got into property. I actually write for the Your Property Network magazine, which I thoroughly enjoy because it's given me another skill, and I get to meet some people perhaps a bit more off the grid in property. I'm an experienced and compliant sourcer, and I've got a mixed portfolio of buy-to-lets, HMOs. Lots of hands-on experience. I went straight to doing a HMO to some large commercial to resi projects. My passion is really working with people. I'm very much a people's person. I'm a coach and mentor, and I focus on removing mindset blockers and helping people to develop and build people skills very quickly, because whilst it might be a property business, it is all about people. And some of those techniques come from the fact that outside of property, I'm a trained past life and future life therapist, which helps me to understand what makes people tick a little bit more. So I can sometimes quite easily see what people's issues are and how to help them to move forward. I'm also an energetic house dowser, and people go, "What is that, Julie?" Well, we all know everything's about energy, and sometimes when you walk into a building, the way you feel about something, that is the energetic vibe that you're picking up. And sometimes the energetic balance in a property, whether that be a commercial, whether it be land, whether it be a house, can be off, and there could be things that are affecting the house. You're having problems, you're not attracting the right people. So by working with that energy and rebalance it, I can, I've had some fantastic results with that. So anybody wants to talk about that, I can talk all day long. So that's just a bit about me. My key property learnings, I think it's key to share this. We see a lot in property that is about roses around the door. I think sometimes there's not always perhaps an approach to share a bit more of the behind the scenes, the worries, the challenges. But for me, the biggest thing that I see is this is about your journey. Particularly when I see people going through programs, they can become a little bit affected by what other people are doing, and it's really important to understand this is about you. Your life position is different to somebody else's, where you want to be is different to somebody else's, so you just focus on your own race. It's very important, and we are going to talk about doing the due diligence, as I said, on the people as well as the projects. Everybody focuses on the numbers for the projects and sometimes forget the people side of things. Your partner and trade choices in what you do are paramount, because they can take you over budget, they can cause you serious financial challenges. And for me, it's really important to know the area you're investing in and be clear on your strategy, because I know when I started, I just moved into a new area. And when I look back now, defining my gold mine area, or the area I wanted to work in, I knew subconsciously that held me back until I felt really comfortable with understanding that area. And just to share with people, things don't always go to plan. The only two things I can really say to people, I can guarantee, is that it always takes longer than expected, and it usually costs more than you planned for. So don't be surprised with those things. And the roller coaster is really symbolic for me, because when you start, your highs and lows can be can have more variances in them. I think as you get more experience in property, you learn to ride some of those variances in a slightly different way. So yeah, just don't expect the expected, folks, and you'll be absolutely fine. So I want to talk a bit about joint ventures and business collaborations. What are the advantages and what are the considerations? Because, we hear about lots of joint ventures in this business, and people say to me, what's a joint venture? What's a typical joint venture? A joint venture can be anything you want it to be, as long as the parties involved actually agree on that. I think typically in the industry, what we see is someone will bring an opportunity, somebody else might have the funding, someone might bring a different skill, and they might share finances between them. There are lots of different ways of doing this, but what's important is that all parties understand it and actually agree to it, and have clear documents on how that's going to work. Because people go into this sort of stuff, and it's like any relationship, marriage, partnership, whatever you want to call it. It's great when it first started, that first flourish of love, and you're skipping down the road holding hands. And that's the time when you need to set things up about, well, what happens when we get to a point, if we get to a point that we haven't got this relationship. It's really difficult to try and sort things out when things have become acrimonious, because you're never going to get to a point where you agree. So it's really important to do this in advance. The advantages of working either as a business collaboration or joint ventures is that obviously you can leverage more deals. It isn't just you trying to do everything. We all know property can be a very lonely journey sometimes, and it is good to have people, someone that you're working with that's got the same goal as you, to be able to bounce things off. If it's only a what if, it's just doing some of those sanity checks. It enables you to have increased knowledge and expertise. Your skill base will be different to somebody else's. Anybody that works with wealth dynamics will and understands that will know that it's great to have complementary skills. It can be very much about a shared risk and reward model. A true JV is about risk and reward. It allows a partner to build their experience and credibility, and by that what I mean is You know, I've worked with people. I had a mentee once that came into one of my big deals as an investor, and prior to that, they'd only bought one property. At the end of this quite large project, they, on paper, had the ability to get development finance. So it does, you know, it can increase your credibility of what you want to do, and it can give you a broader access to resources. We all know different people. You know, you can reach out. You can get some further reach. Some of the real considerations to think about quite seriously if you're doing something like this is when you're in a true JV, particularly if you're in SPV and it's a company that you're part of, you are tied to someone financially. So you need to understand the impact of that. You know, if someone is doing stuff elsewhere in their own right, it can have an impact on you if they have any challenges. Off the back of that, your reputation can be impacted through no fault your own. People don't always in this game go out to do things wrong. Unfortunate things happen to good people. So just be very mindful of that. And a big key thing for me that it took me a bit of a time to understand, I would say, is compatibility in terms of values. I think we throw this around quite lightly, but if you don't have shared values with someone, that's when you will start to, you know, you'll start to get some of the kinks showing through, because basically you may want different, you want different things. Five key components to setting up a JV or a collaboration is you need to have the right documentation. That includes your legal agreements, your share certificates, your articles of association, etc. You know, you can have shareholders agreements. You can put how you want to work in your articles of association. There are different ways of doing this. Be mindful if you are documenting how you want to work in articles of association. Those are available in the public domain. And for some reason, I've just had a warning on the battery and I'm plugged in, so bear with me, folks. Okay, back in business. So you do need to be a little bit cautious on that. Consider the structure of the entity that you want to set up for the assets. Is it going to be a limited company? Is it an LLP? How's all that going to work? Who's got controlling shares? Who can make decisions on removal of directors? How are you going to set up even the bank accounts? You know, some of these things are real important considerations. I've known situations where if things have gone wrong, people have had to find you know, a very quick way of getting people removed from controlling bank accounts. You know, money's gone missing, all that sort of stuff. So I'm not saying this just to scare people, but this is the reality of what you're doing, and you need to understand this. Agree up front how capital investment is going to work for a project. Again, if you agree that people are putting in a certain amount, what happens if you run out of money? Who's going to be responsible for that? Who carries that? What's the contingency? So all really important conversations at the start of the journey. You need to think about control. What's your dispute resolution, and also think about roles and responsibilities. And I got into stuff as silly as when we were running operationally. Well, you know, if one person is traveling further to a property to do something and the other person lives down the road, you know, what's the approach to paying expenses or mileage? Just, you know, some of that real basic fundamental operational stuff is equally as important. It's not just about delivering a project and getting it finished. It's about, if you're going to keep that, how long are you going to keep it for? What's the exit plan? If you want to exit, how many estate agents are you going to get to value? It's all those sorts of things that you need to think through, very much, you know, start to end. And as I said, I've touched on termination and exit unwinding. You know, how does that work? So sounds a lot, but I think it should be all common sense stuff. And you know, I do urge you, put the time in up front to do this, and then you should have a bit more of a smooth sail. So the importance of doing your due diligence is, I talk about it, don't be fooled by S&M, and I'm not making references to people's personal preferences. I'm talking about smoke and mirrors. How many times do we see on Facebook the jangling of keys? I've done this, I've done that. Just be very, very careful. And I'll share with you towards the end of the presentation why there's a big word of caution about doing that, because not everybody that's very good at marketing on Facebook might have the reputation or even the skill base that is right for you. So you do need to be very, very careful with that. You know, people are very good at fooling people. Some of your due diligence considerations, and this is where I got into finding stuff. How do I actually do this sort of stuff myself? Companies House is an incredibly powerful tool, not just about accounting performance and you know, current and previous companies, because if you go on there, have a look at an individual, how many companies have they got, what they currently part of, how long have some of those previous companies been in existence, how did they close down. There's lots of things there that can give you an indicator. Now, in their own right, you just have to just be a bit careful of taking something at face value. As I said, sometimes things can happen to people that's outside their control. But what it does, it gives you a mechanism and it gives you something to have a conversation with about people. I think, and if you don't understand a set of accounts, I can look at accounts and think that looks okay. I can give it to my accountant and I'll go, this is what this picture's telling me, Julie. So if you don't understand something, there are people out there that should be able to help you with that. So if you're not sure, you know, just reach out to your own people. Director disqualifications. This was a really interesting one. And one of the stories for me is I had a partner on a business and personal level that actually turned out to be an international con man. Now, I wasn't one of these silly people that met him on an online platform. I actually, you know, we lived together 5 days a week. I knew all the family, I knew all the children. You know, it wasn't a distant sort of situation. And we got introduced to a third party that we were working with. And this third party had been a solicitor, which was aware of, but wasn't practicing. He was doing more in property. And I actually sat down one day and I said, oh, so-and-so, why don't, you know, why aren't you a practicing solicitor anymore? Because he did work out in Dubai, etc., etc. Well, you know, he's registered over there. And he said, oh, because I actually make more money in property, Julie. Right, okay, fair enough. And at the time, he was the owner of a large commercial portfolio. And he asked me to take on directorship of the portfolio. So on the basis that we'd refinance and we'd take some money out and we'd do a project together. Yeah, happy days, roses round the door. And he said, well, I don't do it for tax reasons because I'm registered in Dubai. And it all sounded very plausible. And he'd sat and looked me in the eyes. I knew his children. They called me Auntie Julie. As I said, these weren't sort of hands-off type relationships. And one day I just happened to go on to Company's House and found this tab called Director Disqualifications. So I went on, and lo and behold, I located said individual who was barred from being a director for 15 years because they had been the CEO of a solicitors LLP who had been sued by the Solicitors Regulation Authority because of irregularities in client accounts. And incidentally, the timings of the procurement of his portfolio was not too far away from when some of these things had happened. And I went on to, there's another tab on Company's House where you can actually look at charges against an individual of a property. And there were 16 charges against 4 properties. And I couldn't quite get my head around this. And I did say, well, what's all this about? And the response was, oh, well, the previous accountant hasn't closed down some things that should have closed down. And I went, I suggest you change your accountant. I presented to my accountant, and I'll never forget to this day, his words rung in my ears. And he said, Julie, if you go into this and you take this on, I'm personally going to have you, I'm going to have you certified. So yeah, you need somebody that's going to tell you the truth. So that actually saved me from potentially being made bankrupt, because between the two of them there was a plan to load me up with finance that would have been in my name, and that there'd have been all sorts of shenanigans going on. So it really is important, folks, that you understand this stuff. It protects you, it protects your investment, and it protects your reputation. So also consider, private names. Don't just look at companies, look at private names. You can use credit reports and scores. Obviously, if you want to do a credit report on somebody, you are really going to need their permission. But if somebody's got nothing to hide, then my suggestion would be they wouldn't have too much of a problem with this. If somebody has had a problem in the past, then I would expect them to be honest and upfront with you, and that's not an issue as long as you understand things. That's the key. It's about transparency and it's about honesty. Also, look at social media. I recently had a situation where I've tracked something down which wasn't as I'd actually been told. So you'd be surprised. People think they can be clever covering things up, but with a little bit of a detective skills, you'd be surprised what you can uncover. And use your online resources, because with the situation I had is, I actually, when I went and researched online, the court case actually came up. I found it online as well. So yeah, people can only fool you so far, to a degree, folks. So just be alert. So some further considerations on due diligence is things around the asset. Obviously, you need to be doing an appraisal on your costs, your GDVs, what are your exits. People ask me a lot about different types of investments. So if there's two key things here, really. If you're doing a JV, it's more risk and reward. A lot of people ask about lending money on a fixed charge basis, which is where you don't take the risk per se on the project, but you do take the risk because you're investing your money. And a lot of people will say, well, I'll give you a personal guarantee. That's okay. Just a word of caution with personal guarantees. How do you know how many PGs an individual may have? If they've got lots of PGs and they haven't got the equity in property or the cash sitting in the bank, what happens if it goes wrong? How are they going to pay you back? Consider first and second charges. Obviously, first charge is always the most preferable option, because then they've got control of an asset, and a lot of big lending platforms do this. They'll take first charge on a property, so if anything happens, they can pull back. Second charge is okay, but obviously you're in a little bit of a queue. Company debentures, we actually do this in one of my companies. We will give a debenture against the company. You can only have one debenture against a company, so that's a consideration. You also need to understand that what your loan to values are going to be on a property. If they're high, can consider the risk and reward of doing that. Also look at using contracts when you're working with tradesmen like JCTs. Just be careful. Some JCTs are quite detailed. Sometimes builders, if it's a smaller project, might not like them. It doesn't really matter what you call something, as long as you've got an agreement that you both understand and that's legally binding. That's really what you're looking for. And those agreements should talk about what happens on payments, on overruns, if things go wrong, all those sorts of things. Because what I'm seeing more and more now in the industry is people are getting more cautious about paying people in advance. This is where you tend to see a lot of problems. A lot of people are taking the approach that they'll pay people on a stage basis, week by week or month by month, when a certain amount of work's being delivered. People might control buying the materials themselves, so they're not just handing money over to another third party. So lots of considerations here about what you need to be doing. You really need clear shareholders agreements, as I've mentioned, articles of association, and operational agreements as well. I think a lot of people tend to forget about the operational agreements. It's all about getting the project done, And then you go, okay, so what do we do now? You know, we're gonna hold this for 5 years. How are we going to manage this, etc. If you are working with people that are bringing money to the table, you also do need to be aware of the AML, anti-money laundering considerations, and the impact. Well, this will also be done via a solicitor. If you are doing a purchase, you yourself need to feel comfortable where any equity or investment is actually coming from. Because I'm a compliance sourcer, I have AML supervision registration with HMRC, and they are really clamping down on this in the moment. So just be very aware. Before you set something up, get expert advice on the right structure. You know, you're going to have a holding company with sub companies. Talk to your accountant in advance about what you want to do, particularly if there's a few people in the company, and how you want to achieve that. Always get the right expert advice. You know, don't think you're going to wing it for saving a few quid, and then you haven't got the right structure. It can be quite costly. And again, I touched on aligned values. You know, working with people. What the values? What's important to you? If they're too disaligned, you can get into some problems with that. One of the things that I've learned over the years, and this always stood me well in industry, because I'm a big observer of people, being a very much people person and being very intuitive, is I look at what I call the what versus the how. And by that I mean, this will give you critical insights into what makes someone tick. So it's about looking at how people respond to a situation. It's not the situation itself, it's people's responses. And people, how someone does something will be how they do everything. So look for the small stuff. I once observed a situation. I'd bought an investor into a deal, and I'd gone along with the deal owners, and we'd take the investors to the site. I was effectively the introducer, and we walked into somewhere for breakfast, and I stood back and watched what was happening. Now, I would have expected in that situation that the opportunity owner would have taken control of that situation and placed the orders. Surprise, surprise, they stood back up the corner, and it was incredibly embarrassing. So I actually took up the reins and went and bought the breakfast. Those individuals turned out to be a little bit dodgy, in the least, should we say. So put people in different situations. You know, go somewhere for a coffee. You know, go out for a bite of lunch. You know, see what happens, how people behave in those situations. Another situation I met somebody at a meeting, and we arranged to do a coffee catch up. I arrived a little bit early. I sat at a table overlooking the door thinking, oh, I'll see them when they come in. That's fine. I'll wait till they come to the table and I'll go and get some drinks. And I turned around and the individual was standing next to me, and they'd got a coffee in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. And I went, oh, okay, that didn't realise you'd arrived. Would you, you know, would you like anything else? That for me, it might be my personal values, but there are some, you know, there are some business courtesies that you adhere to, and somebody just doing things like that made me think, what would they be like to deal with another way? So it does give you an insight into people's personalities and how they work. So it is really powerful. And I can honestly say, in all my years in industry and in property, this has never let me down. So as I said, you know, I've had some really big challenges on the stuff, and it hasn't been the problem that we've experienced. What's got us through and what's been successful is how we've pulled together using the right approach. So yeah, this is a bit of a mantra for me, everyone. And as I said, really powerful stuff. So sort of coming towards the end now, and I can share this example because it was something that was featured on the BBC. There was a company called JVIP that were very prolific in lots of networks, very well known, had a lot of investors, you know, were promoted in different groups, different open arenas, and they went bust. There was 150 people with a total loss of about 30 million after its collapse. They used their brand and sales techniques to make people feel safe. Back to the smoke and mirrors, people in the public domain. They were very well known within the industry, and I do know they were still continuing to seek funding and raise funds, whilst at the back end they were technically insolvent. And if you actually went and looked, and I did just as an exercise afterwards with my accountant, we went and looked at the accounts afterwards. The accounts actually showed you there were some real red flags there. There was some real howlers that this company hadn't actually filed any accounts for 2 years of trading. So, the clues are there, folks. It's up to you to find them. Be very aware of Ponzi schemes. And by that, I mean, promises of false investment returns, because what they do is they borrow from somebody else to pay back a previous investor. Simplistically, that's what a Ponzi scheme is. If the returns are really, really high, do some checks and balance. Is it too good to be true? If it's too good to be true, it normally is, something a bit scary. So so just be careful with that. So my mantra, just to leave you with this one, as I said, things don't always go according to plan. Persistence, and obviously due diligence will also get you there in the end. So thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and for listening. So anybody wants to contact me, those are my contact details.
Excellent. We'll leave those up for a while, and of course, we'll read them out in a minute towards the end, just for anyone who's listening and is lazy, which is most people. So, first of all, yeah, really big thanks for speaking today. It was really interesting to learn a little bit more. Obviously, I know you a little bit, and we've chatted a few times, but interesting to learn a bit about more about you and your journey. I really liked how I'm just using your word, to use your sort of strong intuition, your strong people skills to your advantage. Whatever it is, people listening, whatever your advantage is, use that. If your people skills suck, well, you can work at them and they're important. But if you're brilliant with the spreadsheets, you can use those as well. It's interesting. There's an interesting combination that you seem to use sometimes, was your intuition and people skills, sort of sensing the situation and then chat to your accountant. Those are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, right? But both really valuable, really important tools. Also made you made lots of interesting points. One that stuck out for me and I made a note about was about PGs. Personal guarantees are often like, oh, I can offer a personal guarantee. Those kind of genuinely good, but they need checking, right? Because as you rightly pointed out, someone might have 15 personal guarantees out there and one 2-bed terrace to back up the personal guarantee. So the whole thing's not worth the paper it's written on after a while. So there's things to be aware of, and well, for everybody, but especially for newer investors listening, I think that's invaluable stuff. Speaking of newer investors, and we've got a couple of questions from the floor, which I'll come to. In fact, I might weave one in with this. So I'll ask mine, and then I might ask one that comes in from Yogesh.
Fire away.
Yeah, sure. So mine is around. You talked about the roller coaster. One of the slides had a picture of a roller coaster on it, and you talked about how maybe more experienced investors get better at riding the roller coaster just with experience. But also, I think another thing is, if you've got £1 million in the bank versus having 10 quid in the bank, there's a bit more, it gives you a bit more fat to ride on, doesn't it? Because it makes it a bit easier to ride the roller coaster because you can afford to lose £1,000 or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But my question was going to be then, how do newer investors, other than just gritty years of experience, how do newer investors get better at riding the roller coaster? When maybe they don't know what they don't know.
I think it's using, talk to people, people that you trust, people that have been around in the industry, assuming that you've checked them out and all the things that we've said. If you talk to too many people, you can get into overwhelm, and it is good, I see this in my mentoring. Having accountability is really important. I went through this because after my experience, I lost a lot of money through my ex-partner. I think I was down about 40 grand. And I went into what was called imposter syndrome. I'm experienced, this shouldn't have happened to me, blah, 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 blah. And I had to pull myself out of that. And I actually used a business mentor to do that. So, mentoring and accountability can really help. Somebody that gets to know you, can understand you, because as we all know, it's not just about having the technical knowledge of how to do something, Tom. it's all this other stuff that goes with it. I mean, I got some mentees this week. Obviously, it hit a few walls with a few things. Again, it's all mindset stuff. And it's just having somebody there that's on your side that you can trust to help you to ride some of this storm and to get you through the other side, and to say, look, this is quite normal. This is what I think you need to do. You will get through it. Let's work together on it. That's what's worked for me anyway.
Smashing. Just so I can stop sharing the screen for people listening, how should people get hold of you? Is it your email or the website?
Yeah, my personal email is probably the easy one, whitmorejulie@yahoo.com. If anybody wants to have a look at my website, it's www.consultaireservices.co.uk. My mobile number is 07920 090885. So if anybody's got any questions, wants any help, please reach out to me.
Yeah, we by the way, if anyone wondering, that's not the end of it. I'm just doing this now, sort of ahead of where we usually do it, so we can ask Julie a few more questions, sort of on the big screen for anyone watching on YouTube. For anyone who missed those, just to repeat, in case you were scrabbling for pen and paper, it's Whitmore Julie, WHITMORE, Julie at yahoo.com, or consultaireservices.co.uk. Consultaire is consult and then ARE. Okay, smashing. Well, from a question about maybe less experienced people to a question from Yoga. She's a very experienced person who is asking a question, yes, in two different ways, really, but I'll go with this one, which is, how can you ensure there's fairness in a partnership and that all people are working equally hard?
I think that's got to come down, be very clear on your roles and responsibilities. Yeah. And again, I go, and they all tend to be the same individuals where you see a lot of issues. I know somebody that they did have clear roles and responsibilities, and somebody just, no matter what happened, wasn't delivering on them, so they had to get removed as a director. So, but I think it's those open conversations at the beginning and understanding those shared values. This is about knowing the people that you're working with. This is where you will get the insights into how really it's going to be. But documenting the roles and responsibilities so you can see on paper, then there's no argument. Well, you haven't done that. Well, no, that's not my role. Let's check the roles and responsibilities. So I think that's probably the easiest way I would suggest, Tom, is make sure you've got those documented. And if you're going through a project, obviously have regular check-ins with each other. Where are we at this week? What's happened? Have we got any problems? Is there anything you're not happy with? Is there anything I'm not doing? Have those open conversations with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yogesh, did I ask your question fairly there? Did you have any follow-up questions you wanted to ask Julie about that?
No, I think it's been answered well. I suppose, what about when things go wrong then? How do you rectify them? Any tips on that?
If you can't,
yeah,
if you can't do it between you, if you've got the documentation and you talked about depending what it is. I mean, I actually, with my ex-partner, I actually got my accountant involved to mediate. Yeah. Or doesn't have to be an accountant, but because he did our accounts for the company, and not everybody will do this, he was a really good person because he was very level-headed, he was very objective. If he's not an accountant, is there somebody that can help you to mediate that situation? Between, a bit like marriage counselling, it's property counselling at the end of the day, counselling for property people, if you like. So that would be my suggestion. If you have got to the point it's getting quite fractious, then try and get somebody involved to help you to resolve some of the issues.
Excellent stuff. Thanks for that answer, and thanks for your question. Really good. Nextly, and sort of linked into that, at one point you got the Confucian. It sounded like Confucius wisdom was coming through. You said in a line I noted down, I want to ask about it. You said that a true JV at its sort of heart is about risk and reward. Could you expand on that a bit? It sounds obvious, but I think there's more to it.
Yeah. If you're doing, a joint venture in its truest form, is so there will be a mini element of that partnership or that project, and it's about, if you're putting money in, you go into that knowing that there are risks associated with what you are doing, and you need to understand those risks, because by doing a JV, you are accepting an element of risk, which is very, very different to somebody just being a fixed return investor. And this is where a lot of people get confused. Just say putting in 20k, handing it over to somebody and having an agreement that says you get 10% a year is not a JV. Okay, you are a fixed return investor. So the two are very different. If you're putting money in, and let's just say, argument's sake, you are expecting 75k profit at the end of something, on a JV, you have to understand that 75k return is not guaranteed. So when you're doing a JV, your profits or your returns are not guaranteed, and that's the risk element that you need to understand.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's a really good answer and important for people to understand, especially beginners. There's a difference, isn't there, between, in very simple terms, to simplify maybe what you just said, there's a difference between a loan and a JV, and they have different profiles.
Absolutely.
Some good, some bad, but it's a different thing. Lastly for me, is you talked in detail about the 5 key components. Of course, you can break those down different ways. One's really useful. So things to look at when maybe you're starting a JV or even looking to start to work with someone. It struck me that it's a bit like talking about, hey, let's get the prenup out on the first date, as in we've got a 48-page document here before we get the starter. How do you manage that process? It's not appropriate, is it, to say, hey, good to see you, shake hands at a networking meeting, right? Have a look
Let's
at
go through this.
I think you're one. How do you manage that process?
No, you're right. So what you do is, obviously, when you meet somebody, you tend to, a relationship will organically grow. You'll meet somebody and the relationship will naturally take a path, and you'll start having conversations about working together. And this might not happen overnight. This is the other thing about property. It's a long-term thing. I mean, I've got somebody coming back to me that was a business partner of mine 3 years ago, had to move away from the business because, got too many other priorities going on, and it's just coming back again. So, relationships can take time to move forward. But when you get to the point, if you have decided that you're going to work with somebody, you might have a project, we're going to buy that house over there. It's 200 grand, we're going to flip it, we're going to spend 50k on it, it's worth 350. So we've all agreed that's what we're going to do. At that point, you need to say, okay, so as we start to go into this legal process, all those things are happening, we need to sit down and understand the paperwork, the documentation, because you're going to have to set up a company. So it will have a natural flow, Tom. When you get to the point of starting to create companies, this is where you start to get to the natural flow, because your shareholders agreements will come in, your articles of association, etc., etc. So it will flow off the back of that. Makes it a little bit less awkward, as you said, first date syndrome.
Sure, smashing. That's really useful, really thorough. I think really useful for people, maybe people especially who are starting out with this stuff, but even a really good reminder for those who are, because people in business who've been in business and been in property a while, getting more and more complex situations, right? And it's worth revisiting these things to think, oh, cracky, I've got 2 businesses and these are going well. What about this third one? It's usually just skip steps or forget about things, and then things can go pear-shaped, as we've seen. People in the chat have been saying they've been burned by various investment bits and pieces, and I very nearly was myself when I first started out, and was sort of rescued by a solicitor. So things can get, again, nobody wants to, like Julie said earlier, we don't want to, this isn't about scaring people, but it's about protecting yourself to make sure that you don't end up in a bad situation. So with that in mind, if anyone's got any concerns or wants advice and things, we share Julie's contact details, so feel free to get in touch with Julie for that, or for the other services that she offers, like mentoring things she mentioned. Thank you very much.
Can I just add one other thing, Tom? Sorry. From my own experience, I think what I've observed is people, and I know people are being quite open on the group now about their experiences, but sometimes people feel really embarrassed that this has happened to them. It's almost a sense of shame. Don't and won't reach out to people. Don't be like that. People that go out to be disingenuous intentionally, that's the effect they want to have. So, you know, if this has happened to you, you know, don't feel stupid, ashamed, or all the rest of it, because that's just a natural reaction. You know, to help you to move through it and to deal with it, it's always better if you can reach out to people to help you to cope with stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'd echo that, and I'd also say that probably half the people that you know and look up to in property have done a similar thing. You know, have either lost money or got very close to losing large amounts of money on investments like that. So don't worry about it if that's you, or yeah, if that's you, then do chat to someone. It's better than not doing. Thank you very much to everyone who attended today. Really appreciate it as always. Thank you very much, especially of course to our lovely host Julie Whitmore. Thanks for everyone for listening on the podcast, watching on the YouTube, and hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. Good to meet you all.